I'm going to take my Pentax MX and set it up so that I can use it as a point and shoot camera. That way I can take some quick snapshots using this small, old school automatic flash. And this is how I'm going to do it. Hey everyone, welcome. Today I want to talk about some basic flash photography while using the zone focus method with my all manual 35mm SLR camera, the Pentax MX. Now I haven't found a need to use a flash very often, especially for the type of photography I've been working on these days. But occasionally I do get the urge to shoot some flash pictures, mostly though at an event like a party or a wedding. So I decided to shoot some ISO 400 speed film using my Pentax MX with a 35mm lens and a separate older non-TTL automatic flash that I would attach to the flash view of the camera. I chose to match the camera with a 35mm lens, which is just wide angle enough that I'm able to preset an in-focus range or zone of focus from about 5 feet to around 15 feet. By simply setting the aperture of the lens to f8 and then set the distance on the lens to approximately 7 or 8 feet, making this lens a perfect match for the flash I was going to use. Now that flash would be an old compact Promaster FT-1700 bounce flash that will give me an automatic exposure range from about 4.5 feet to 17.5 feet when setting my aperture to f8 with 400 ISO film. By simply setting the sensor on the front panel of the flash to the goal position and then positioning the flash head in a straight on position. This particular flash and flashes such as this, like the Vivitar 2800, have a similar automatic range and are still quite inexpensive and are still fairly easy to find, generally for about $20 or less in case anybody's interested in this type of photography. So unlike today's newer auto TTL flashes, which determine the correct exposure right through the lens of the camera, these earlier automatic flashes used a little sensor that was in the front panel of the flash, and that would simply read the light bouncing back from the subject to determine the correct exposure. And that would even work when you use it in the bounce mode, since the sensor was still facing the subject even though the flash was pointing up at the ceiling. And with a majority of these older manual cameras, you had to manually select the correct flash synchronization speed. And this particular camera was a 60th of a second, or of course you could use anything slower than a 60th. But the majority of the cameras at the time this was made was around 125th of a second or slower. So in summary, I have the camera loaded with Fomapan 400, I have the shutter speed set to 1/60th of a second, flash is mounted on the hot shoe, the flash is set to the gold auto setting on the front panel of the flash, I have the lens aperture set to f8 and the focus distance indicator set to 7 feet. I have now set up a focus-free auto exposure range. All I have to do is look through the viewfinder, frame the subject, and snap the photo.